How are you tonight, man?
I'm good, man. This
Yeah.
is great to be with you here on Facebook Live. First time I've done a Facebook live feed that's more than one person, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. Obviously, as Facebook Live develops more, we're going to see all kinds of new technology and ways to interact with people, and I think this will be a lot of fun. For those of you that are unaware, this man sitting here with me is a legend in the firearms industry, the PDN. It's PDN Network or PDN, right?
Yeah,
Personal defense. Yeah, yeah. I always hear it like mixed up a bunch of different ways. Why don't you give people like a super brief rundown of what you do and who you are for the people that may not be familiar?
Yeah, primarily educator in the defensive community, personal defense, home security, things like that. Teach a lot of military and law enforcement over the years. Been in the industry for about a little over 20 years. Actually got my start really doing things, kind of a nationwide scene or industry-wide scene writing for SWAT magazine and some of the other magazines. Did a few TV shows. Published about 112 DVDs, training DVDs that were
Is that
largely
all?
distributed.
Just 112?
So primarily education, but a lot of content development, and really did develop a lot of my approach to training as a student, as everybody usually says. But unlike most people that are a student, for 20 years in one area of the military or one area of the law enforcement, I had the privilege as a journalist really to go out and research and experience a lot of different courses,
Sure.
whether it was private sector executive protection work that I was doing or law enforcement affiliations I had, the connections to the industry, and my perspective of looking at the classes from not just my own takeaways, but also from the takeaways of the potentially hundreds of thousands of people I was going to be sharing the experience with. I
Right,
really
right.
influenced the way I thought about training, and then eventually the way I thought about teaching, which I've been doing full time now since 2003.
That is awesome. It's so incredible to see so many people, kind of leading the charge as far as entrepreneurship in the gun industry, the guntrepreneurs as I call it. I think it's a really cool thing. And through those massive amount of connections that you've made, you've been given some really interesting opportunities. And one of them recently, what was this, last week, right? You were
Yes,
over.
a week ago today, I got on the plane, and a week ago yesterday, I found out I was getting on the plane, for sure. So it all came up within about 36 hours, maybe 48 hours from the first Facebook message I got from a kind of arm's reach acquaintance, guy I knew from back home in Florida, and turned into an amazing experience that really unique in a lot of different ways.
Sure, sure. I mean, that's not exactly a normal story to just get a random phone call or hey, come do this thing over on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean and look at this
Right.
really, really unique handgun. So the thing we're talking about, guys, is called the FK BRNO 7.5 FK, right? That's the whole name of the pistol. Is that how they're doing it?
So the round is the FK BRNO 7.5.
Is that how they're pronouncing it?
Yeah, so BRNO, BRNO, it's the home. Most people know CZ Firearms in the Czech Republic. Brno is the second largest city in the Czech Republic,
Hmm.
and because it's kind of translated from Cyrillic, you don't get vowels and consonants. BRNO, BRNO is pronounced Brno, and it's named after the city. The company's named after the city, so it's FK BRNO is the name of the company. The FK BRNO 7.5 is the ammunition, and the FK BRNO 7.5 field pistol is the handgun.
The field pistol. Okay. Okay. So this is something that's very, very, very unique. I covered this on TGC News a while back and was kind of in shock about what it is and the claims that they made. And you've actually now had the opportunity to have it in your hands, shoot it, test it, etc. Why don't we just kind of go through the basics of what you saw? Because I'm super interested in this. They claim the power of a 44 Magnum in a semi-auto that holds, what was it, 17 rounds?
Yeah, so the original, last year, the specs, the original magazines were 14+1. The current magazines are 16+1. And I know, like, for instance, a lot of my neighbors here in Colorado and people back in New Jersey, they're asking, well, gee, can we get some of those 14-round magazines with guns when we get our hands on them? But yeah, it's amazing what they say they are capable of doing. So honestly, yours was one of the first pieces I saw on the gun. There was a short article in one of the NRA publications. Yankee Marshall did a little piece on it. I thought Richard Johnson over at Guns, Holster, and Gear, who just did a kind of what we're doing, but he just sent me a bunch of questions. He's going to be publishing some follow-up information in regard to his article. He did a really good article that also went into the research, not just of what they're claiming, but kind of comparing it to history. Well, let's see, just looking at their website, here's some other options in terms of fast shooting, bullets that come out of handguns really fast. And
right.
Not like somebody takes a Thompson Center and shoots a 308 out of it, but legit, handguns and usually handgun cartridges. So when I did that quite a quick research, like, well, what are you inviting me to go see? It was obviously really intriguing and really interesting. And to be fair, I was incredibly skeptical getting on the plane. Like I said, not really having anybody that I had any close ties to. Now, I've been going to the Czech Republic since 2006. I've taught over there a lot. They have a huge gun culture. They have, unlike the U.S., something like 80%, 75-80% of their gun owners, the last time I saw, have concealed carry permits.
Okay.
Against the EU and their gun control issues. There's a bunch of stuff that has gone on in that history of the 10, 12 years I've been going over there. And I enjoy it. I enjoy the country. So when someone says, hey, we'll fly you over there if you want to come check this out, no other Americans had a chance to check it out. New gun, new facility, new company. And we're not planning on doing a big press trip. The gun's going to be at EWA, the European version of SHOT Show that's coming up in a few weeks. And we got some new things coming out, some advancements even before it hits the U.S. But the gun is now approved for U.S. import. And it was actually the company that's going to be importing the gun, BH Defense, out of Florida, that made the contact to me to say, hey, here we have an open invitation. We think, given your experience in the gun industry over a long period of time, kind of being known as a straight shooter, guy who doesn't pull any punches, kind of gives his opinion directly and freely. And I think uniquely the fact that now not only have I had that experience as the trainer and as the educator and as the journalist and as the researcher and as a shooter, go back far enough as a competitive shooter even, but also now I'm a gun manufacturer. I've gone through the process of designing a gun, and we're about to bring a new gun to market and launch a new gun company. So I have some definite empathy with the trials and simulations go along with that. And we're just making a striker fired 9mm polymer gun that isn't radically different from anything else. This is radically different.
So how would you describe this? I mean, it's got flavor from a bunch of different things. It looks a little bit like a CZ. It's got some 1911 looks here and there. I mean, how would you describe this thing? And, what makes it really unique? I mean, obviously the biggest standout on the exterior of the gun is that gigantic lug under the barrel, which I believe is where that recoil system resides, correct?
Yeah, and it's
you know what? Well, before we get there, I'm going to actually try and share your article. So, guys, on personaldefensenetwork.com, Rob's got the first part of a 2-part article up here, and I'm going to pull it up so you guys at home can see the pistol. Here we go. You should be able to see that at home to get a really good look about what we're talking about. It's very strange looking. The sights are very, very unique in comparison to what we're used to. But it's got, like I said, it's got a lot of features that we are familiar with, and we're gonna keep talking about it here. So, yeah, Rob, kind of describe it. Go ahead.
So starting out, it's a single action semi-automatic pistol that is CZ-esque. It is in some ways 1911-esque. There are plenty of guns that have been influenced by the CZ. There's no direct connection except for being in the same country, in the same town, to CZ from FK BRNO. Sure. That lug that you're talking about, it reminds me of a full lug underneath of a revolver, which, given the ties to Magnum powered revolver rounds being really the only viable comparison to the way this bullet performs, is interesting. But what happens when you open that up, and I'll be actually putting out another article, part 2, either go out tonight or tomorrow morning. It's going to be a 4-part series I'm doing leading up to March 1st, and then EWA is that following weekend. And the gun should be coming into the country soon. So this 4-part series will exist for people to do all their research and kind of my findings. But unlike, the Hudson that we were all talking about last month, this does have a lowered recoil guide rod and recoil spring, but it's not radically lowered, right? It still looks like kind of a traditional handgun. It's just an oddly low lug that sort of looks like it came off a revolver and got stuck on the front of a pistol, but you still get the front of the pistol guard the trigger guard on this pistol, it's not radically lowered like the Hudson is.
Sure,
Now,
sure.
what the gun feels like, which is kind of where you started, it feels like a very well balanced, hefty gun. It doesn't feel super front heavy and awkwardly large, like a Desert Eagle. It feels like a good semi-auto, like I call it CZ-esque. It's actually one of the terms I use to describe the Avidity PD-10. I like that CZ-esque grip, that deep top of the grip. Interestingly, that the developer told me that like the father of this gun really is the Browning High Power. He carried the Browning High Power as in a war zone in the Middle East over an extended period of time for personal defense and as a backup gun. In some cases, a low profile gun, certain situations, an armed professional. And, he was very comfortable with that gun in terms of shooting it, holding it, but he believes that the 9mm round is basically useless in the context that he was trying to design a gun and a piece of ammunition for.
Okay, so did they actually create this gun around the cartridge, or was it kind of simultaneous? Like where did that come from? Because it's a bottleneck cartridge, and obviously here in the States, the one everybody is going to be most familiar with would be either the 357 SIG or the 5.7 from the FN 5.7. How does it compare to those types of things? Like, is it significantly more powerful? What are we talking about?
Yeah, it's radically more powerful and more capable than both of those guns in a couple of different ways. And I'll come back to that, because first, the question you asked is a really, really important one. What came first, the cartridge or the firearm? And what FK BRNO says today is that they're basically now an ammunition company that also makes the delivery platform. They also build the handgun. They didn't set out to be that. Really, they set out to be an R&D firm. They wanted to research and develop a round and handgun combination that would meet certain performance criteria. And that performance criteria is best summed up as delivering AK-47 terminal ballistics out to 150 meters, and they really weren't worried about anything closer than 50 meters. So between 50 and 150 meters, wanting to have performance out of a handgun that would emulate the AK-47 round, the 7.62 by 39 in the military round. So it's a little different than a 5.56 round. They're kind of lumped together a lot, but the 5.56 round is really designed to break apart in the original design, and the 7.62 round isn't. It's designed to yaw and tumble and get a lot of depth of penetration, and also probably much more capable of penetrating some intermediate barriers, light armor, soft armor,
Sure.
Skin vehicles, things like that. So the idea was, now that seems ludicrous, right? And that was sort of that was why I was really skeptical. I never like, okay, you want a handgun that's going to be controllable, that's going to be incredibly accurate, like rifle accurate in many ways, and yet, out of a 6-inch barrel, and yet perform like an AK-47 at 125, 150 meters. So obviously there was a lot of research and development that had to go on. And the laboratory that I spent 3 of the days in, one day, pretty much like, here's a big pile of ammo, here's Doppler radar, and here's the backup radar, and here's the table, and here's the rest, and here's the test barrel, and here's the computers, and here's the guys with all kinds of amazing armed professional experience that know how to run this lab, and they're pretty much all at your disposal. Here's a slow motion camera, here's a video crew to document it all. What do you want to try? What do you want to see? Oh, and by the way, here's a safe with like scores of guns if you want to pull one out and load it and compare it to the FK BRNO. Have fun. So,
wow.
And when I say a facility like I've never seen before, like, honestly, I saw things, devices that I've never been in the presence of. One of them was about a 6 meter by 6 meter frame that electronically catches the bullet as it goes through and then displays it on the computer. Now, what's interesting about this is that frame lives at the end of a full size 100-meter range. Now, sometimes you get a 100-yard test tube, or you get something like that. And I've shot in some pretty cool facilities that do ballistic testing and development of new guns, development of new loads and cartridges, bullet design, things like that, where you shoot down, you're on a table and you kind of just shoot down, and meanwhile a chronograph in there measures the speed. When you talk about Doppler radar in a range that is, I could run a combat focus shooting class, and we wouldn't do it from 100 meters. We go down there.
Right.
We'd go down there and we could have 5 shooters shoulder to shoulder shooting on our targets, lateral movement, reload, everything else. So this is a real range, and it's well ventilated, well lit, well built, and we're shooting into this frame down there. And then a little computer readout shows you what your group size is. And I'm on a rest sitting on tail, and everybody who knows me knows I'm not a shoot a 5-shot group guy. I don't know when the last time I shot a 5-shot group and really cared about it was. Certainly out of a handgun.
So, at 100 meters with a handgun.
So I'm sitting at a table, like, you know, a thing you buy from Cabela's or Gander Mountain. And it's probably on sale if you go to Gander Mountain next week. You go there. I'm sitting on the table, resting the front of the gun on this little rifle-y rest kind of thing, you know, like that we all have seen a million of them at the gun range, shooting 5-shot groups and one of them, I sent a picture of one of them to somebody today. It was, you got to do the translation in millimeters, then centimeters, then inches, but it was 3.9 by 5.4. And then there was another one I looked at. I had the screenshots of these things, and they all average about 5 by 5, 4 by 5, somewhere in that range, depending on whether I was screwing it up and stringing vertically or stringing horizontally. When we put the 6-inch test barrel on the 6,000-pound multi-angular adjustable magic shooting table, the 6-inch test barrel is shooting 1.1 inches, like consistently. A couple of the groups were under an inch, a couple of the groups maybe were an inch and a half, but very consistent. And when I say we didn't shoot one group, we didn't shoot 6 groups, we shot groups and groups and groups. And mostly we worked with the test barrel the first day. We did ballistic gelatin testing at 100 meters. So I've never shot ballistic gelatin past 20 meters, even with rifle testing. Usually we're taking, like with Winchester ammunition, we'll take their 308 round from the defender line and we'll shoot it purposefully at 10 feet through nothing but light clothing to show that it dissipates all its energy and stops in 12 inches, because that's kind of what we're looking for here in the U.S. But when you want to stop an ambush of your security convoy in a war zone in Afghanistan, Iraq, name the spot, you're shooting at a guy that's 100 yards away because that guy didn't walk up to you and try to steal your wallet, right? And that's what's important to understand, is this isn't a law enforcement duty gun. It's not a close quarters battle gun. It's not a concealed carry at the convenience store kind of gun, right? This gun is designed to be deployed inside of that vehicle, where it's going to be a lot easier to move a pistol around than a rifle, to be able to help the guy that would be in the position of being on a high-risk security team in that convoy deliver around at 75, 100, 150 meters where the ambush is coming from, because that's where an ambush is going to be coming from. If you've got a checkpoint, if you've got a compound, if you've got an estate in a place and you have a very highly trained security team that works on your estate, and you've got standoff, you've got cameras, you've got alarms, you may very well find yourself being attacked from 50, 100, 150 meters away. So this incredibly narrow niche, but it's a really well-defined niche. And that's why they wanted a bullet that performed the way it did. So check accuracy, good to go. 6-inch barrel, ridiculous accuracy. The power of the round is, you see the numbers on their website, you see the numbers, and I'll put the numbers in my articles. The power is very much comparable to a .44 Magnum. You've got a 100-grain bullet. I shot 3 different types of bullets. Only one of them is going to be brought into the U.S. These bullets are CNC machined. They are much more like a rifle bullet than a pistol bullet. They're 100, like I said, give or take, they're 100 grains. They're moving at one side or the other of 2,000 feet per second. So we saw on the radar some things down around 1950. And I did shoot I did shoot some barrels that weren't 6 inches as well. So we shot some smaller barrels, and then I shot the 6-inch barrels. The 6-inch barrels were all delivering 2,000 feet or just in excess of that with all 3 rounds.
And a 100-grain bullet coming out at 2,000 feet per second is staggering. That's fantastic out of a handgun.
But check this out. 1,500, it's still going at 1,500 feet per second at 100 meters.
Wow.
And because it's a rifle bore. It's not moving. Sure. It's not got a huge surface area on the front, and it's designed to track well and be incredibly accurate. So it's delivering 100 grains at 1,500 feet per second at 100. And it's still maintaining 1,300 plus feet per second out at 150 meters. So now you start talking about terminal ballistics. What is this bullet going to do inside the body? Well, the hollow tip is pre-scored, and it's designed to have the front cone area of the hollow tip break off. So you're left with a, and the total weight of the stuff that breaks off is significantly less than 10 grains. So you've got a 90 plus grain cone designed to remain intact and tumble and yaw through the body. And, the and then my next article is going to talk a lot about terminal ballistics and have a little primer in there. People that don't really know what that's all about. The terminal ballistics is what happens inside the target, inside the body in this case. And handgun bullets generally cause damage based on surface area and depth of penetration. So it's just cutting and smashing. The bullet expands, you get more surface area, but that creates more drag, so you don't get as much depth of penetration. If the bullet, the jacket falls off and the lead starts flaking out, you don't have weight retention, which ruins your momentum, so you don't get depth of penetration, and sometimes you'll get skewed travel because only one side of that point. Old stuff. So modern bonded hollow points, they uniformly expand and they generally retain their weight, and that's the basis of how they damage. They expand their surface area, they cut through the body. Rifle bullets have an extra mechanism of damage, and that's the hydrodynamic shot. And I'll talk about why I didn't say hydrostatic in the article that comes out. So
okay,
you've got this shock wave that goes through the body, and there's been a lot of research on this. There was for a while, there were some detractors of the concept, but it's pretty well established that this is real, that there is damage caused by the disruption of the mostly fluid body. And the wave, because the fluid doesn't compress, the wave that moves through it, it'll break up blood vessels. In some cases,
I mean, to be honest with you, I've actually seen that firsthand with the Lehigh Defense Extreme Penetrator bullet. Relies on that same technology, that same concept. And there's a lot of people out there that say it doesn't work, but I shot through a 40. It was I think 40 inches of pig up at some ranch here in Pennsylvania, and I mean, the wound channel was massive the entire way through. And it's a new concept, especially in handguns. And you're saying, so I want to try and fully understand. So the nose of the bullet hits, it immediately shatters, dumping a ton of energy there. And then you get your deep penetration from the remainder of the bullet. Is that correct?
No, it's not that kind of thing where, there is no importance to the damage caused or the energy transfer from the front of the bullet breaking off.
So it's just breaking, and then you get to
increase. So with that, what that is going to do is that's going to give you a surface area that is less likely to track straight through the body and give you the yawing. That's going to give you the length of the bullet to create a permanent wound cavity. But the speed of the bullet, because the bullet is still supersonic when it hits the body, the speed of the bullet, and that's why it's generally rifle bullets and not pistol bullets, that's what causes this shock wave. So the shock wave is going to break up blood vessels. It can damage organs. It can damage the bones. But the other most important thing here really that you can't get with the handgun bullet is that shock wave obviously is going to affect the nervous system. So back in the old days, there were mostly the guys that detract from the shock theory are like the kind of guys that still thought 45 ACP and 1911s were the best thing to have even in like 2010, right? So the idea of slow and heavy versus fast and light, that used to be something we talked a lot about in the 90s. And I was always in the fast and light crowd. And I was also in the crowd that said, police should be carrying 5.56 rifles, not shotguns. In home defense, we should do the research, and we've done the tests and published the information that shows that the 5.56 bullet poses less danger on the other side of drywall than a heavy 9mm or certainly a 40 caliber or 45, a rounded pistol bullet that's 2 or 3 or 4 times as heavy as a 5.56 55 grain and is going to maintain that momentum and keep tracking through those walls. So I've studied this a lot. In fact, when I was in high school, my term paper in U.S. history was on the adoption of the 5.56 round instead of something else coming out of the research that was done in the 50s and 60s. So this concept of how rifle bullets perform in the body, I've been kind of studying for 30 plus years. So it was really interesting to now not really have cared about that for the last decade, because we're talking about 9mm in close quarters personal defense out of a handgun, and to sort of get that rekindled in my brain as an area of interest. And by the way, the developer of the gun really is an incredibly intelligent guy. This is well thought out. Now he's well funded also, and he's brilliant. So you kind of end up with this laboratory, a research and development firm with a manufacturing floor, the likes of which I really haven't seen in terms of they're machining the bullets, they're forming the cases, they're EDM, CNC, all the multi-angle 72 axis crazy machine stuff. Then they've got the laboratory, so what happens is the guy develops these parameters that he wants to meet, And in his attempts to collaborate, 2012 era, 2008, 2010, 2012 era, in his attempts to collaborate with some existing gun companies, existing manufacturing companies, existing ammunition companies, he just finally comes to the conclusion that he's going to have to do this himself. That there's always going to be these pressures of efficiency, or these pressures of budget, or these pressures of timeline, or the pressures of marketability, and he ends up building his own manufacturing facility. And if his final attempt to collaborate, which was actually related to the ammunition production and packaging and all that, had worked, we probably would have seen these guns in the U.S. last year. But he basically had to build an entire ammunition manufacturing process as well. Like I said, right from machining the bullets to forming the cases, loading them, packaging them, for retail, all that. They're doing all that now too. So he's really, when he says he's an ammunition company that happens to be making the pistol, it's a little bit tongue in cheek. But it becomes true.
So what I think is one of the number one things that a lot of guys are talking about here, and I'm looking at the Facebook comments for everybody out there watching. The people are basically trying to figure out when this thing is going to hit. You said it's approved for importation, which is amazing in and of itself. That we didn't really hear about the gun, and very, very quickly it seems it's actually ready to be imported. What are we looking at? Did they give you any information on time frame, ammo availability? That was a question I saw here asked, and maybe even a U.S. price point. Do we have any of that kind of information yet?
So of course, there was an NDA and there was we're not sure yet, and we're not ready for this to come out yet. But here's what I can tell you is that everything on our side of the ocean is approved, including the import licenses. So the importer has been approved to bring in a certain number of guns. Everything's good here. Over there, they can't start the process, as I understand it, to export until everything's been approved here. So that's kind of where they are right now. As far as guns and ammunition and all that being ready to go, I saw the factory, I saw the pieces, the parts, the packaging, the whole thing, right? That's all good to go. So the timeline, I'd be shocked if we don't see these things by this summer. I expect
that's pretty quick.
Yeah, when I go over for Euroshot, as I call it, when I go over for EWIN in a few weeks, of course I'll see these guys, and I expect an update, and maybe there'll be some more to share as far as this incredible opportunity they've given me to be the disconnected, but incredibly interested American, relaying the information, kind of what I'm getting firsthand, what my experiences were firsthand, and now hopefully I'll be able to follow up on some of that. I think that the question about ammo. There wasn't a hard and fast, you'll never see this ammunition made in the U.S. What there was a hard and fast answer, which I take to be very forthright, was that there isn't an intention to license the production of ammunition to other people that want to do it their way. So I don't think you're going to see a tap round or an XTP or a Winchester, bullet thrown in. I really think that everything here is so exacting, and it really is a complete package that, whereas they may decide to start manufacturing at some point the ammunition here in the U.S. to make the supply chain easier, I don't see them saying, hey, we want some other company to do it. They kind of went through that and it didn't work. So, right down to their own blend of powder going into the case. One of the things that's interesting is it's funny reading the speculation now, because there was a lot of speculation. I remember doing the same kind of thing with the 224 Boz, 12 years ago, whatever that.
Well, I mean, that's not going to stop until it hits the actual U.S. market and people start either taking game or having actual real life, protective duty type experience with it. I mean, the speculation is going to remain. And that's said even with guns that are made here every day,
Sure. And I think it's interesting. One of the things they wanted conveyed was they're saying, well, the breech face is essentially the same as a 10 millimeter. So you could probably just take a 10 millimeter round and stretch it, or you could take the old 10 millimeter auto magnum rounds if you had a box of those somewhere. And
magically somebody's got one box.
Yeah. And the problem is they've experimented with that, right? That would have been a lot easier. That would have been cooler. They would have had to do this thing with forming the rest. You'll blow your gun up. I mean, you'll have a gun that's not going to be cheap. It's going to be, like I've been saying, it's kind of in the precision rifle, high-end precision rifle, or a very high-end 1911, like that's the price range we're talking about.
Wow. Okay.
You're going to own that gun, and then you're going to decide you're going to save like 42, cents every 100 and hand load on old 10 millimeter brass. You're going to blow your gun up. Those cases won't handle the pressure. So there really isn't anything out there like it. There isn't a bullet that you can go out and say, oh, I'm going to try this bullet in it. Like those don't exist either. There are no like interchangeable parts. It's not CZ grips. It's not the sights. The sights are interestingly the two things.
Yeah, you know what? I'll pull up the image you have on the article of the sights so that guys at home can see. Let me get the screen sharing up here because like we talked about briefly earlier, it is completely unique. There is no kind of sights. I mean, they almost look like anti-aircraft sights. I mean, let's be fair. That's a very, very
butterfly
unique.
Sights. So they're calling them butterfly sights because you kind of get that. I think it looks like a bow tie. I'd have called them bow tie sights, but they're calling them butterfly sights. The interesting thing about it is I played with a lot of different ghost rings. Now the ghost ring attempts, I should say. The problem usually with ghost rings on a pistol, and this is going all the way back to like when I was working with Glock, they were sponsoring some things I was doing in the late 90s, and they were thinking about maybe discontinuing the 10 millimeter. And instead, I was also doing some stuff with Realtree, and we came up with this idea of like dipping Glocks in Realtree camo and putting ghost ring sights on them and a 6-inch barrel and calling it the RT Hunter with Realtree. And there were like 2 ever made, and I think I lost both of them in divorces. So anyway, at one point, like ghost ring was we tried a ghost ring on that project. We tried ghost rings other places. Usually, the problem is the reason the ring ghosts is because it's really close to your eye, right? And then the post is way out here on a rifle. With a pistol, your ring is kind of way out there, and it's very close to the front sight. So if you're focused on the front sight, there isn't enough distance difference to make a depth of field thing happen where the rear ghosts out, because the ghosts are built to be robust and all that. So when you look at that picture you put up earlier of the profile of the gun, the reason that you've got the butterfly is because the ring really is incredibly thin. It's a very thin ring, and with that 6-inch slide distance, it's enough of a difference with as thin as the metal is to truly make it ghost out. So you need, much like an AR has, you need those little protective wings on either side of this butterfly sight. And those struts, I guess we could call them the support struts that come in at the top of the ring, which again are very thin because you want them to ghost out as well, so that you truly do have this sort of natural sight shows up in the circle thing going on. Now, all this said, it works. So their design works. I did not take to that sight at all at first. I was so, and in my head, I'm so, I think, prejudiced towards ghost rings on pistols anyway, especially because there have been so many that have been done poorly, that I came in skeptical, and now the first shots I took with this gun were on a 20-inch gong at 100 meters in front of the developer, his staff, like these former Eastern European SWAT cops and SF guys, a video crew that was documenting everything I was doing, and the U.S. importers that invited me. And like, I'm 12 hours off the plane, never pulled the trigger on the gun. I just watched a test barrel shoot a 1-inch group multiple times in a row, and then they say, "Here, you try
it." That's a bit intimidating.
Okay. And I put this, and I mean, there was a couple of like, breaths and adjustments and like shake my shoulder out. Like, I don't even know what I was doing except like buying time. Maybe they were going to want to go to lunch. We'll go to lunch. You let us know how it went. But we were going away. So I started shooting it, and I started getting more used to it. Within a couple of shots, I was hitting the gong. I was probably running 30-40% with my first few shots, first few rounds, hitting a 20-inch gong at 100 meters offhand, just standing there. With a sight system that I wasn't super comfortable with, and I'm still a little skeptical of, just because of the size of the front circle. The size of the front circle is supposed to be a human chest at 100 meters. So if I'm supposed to be able to engage a human at 150 meters, that means my front sight's larger than the thing I'm trying to hit within the design parameters. And if there was one thing, obviously I thought about this, if I had to look for one thing and say, no, I'm just not sure they've done that as well as they could have or should have, or maybe eventually will, it's the relationship between the front sight and the rear sight in terms of size. I actually did get to shoot one, an older. They had 42 shooting prototypes, by the way, if I didn't mention that. When I say 42 different shooting prototypes, I saw a bunch of them. It's not like a different color. It's like a different slide height, a different trigger shape, a different beaver tail length. It's the frames were different.
That's interesting.
It was amazing that the process, it was an R&D firm. So what they did to get this gun right, it's amazing.
Right.
The gun, interestingly, will ship with a set of traditional notch rear sight as well.
Huh.
So
okay.
The gun for people who prefer that, quote unquote, the gun's going to come with that type of sighting system also. I've seen some really innovative sight things that work really well in target shooting environments that don't really, to me, seem applicable to a defensive, combative, dynamic environment. And the butterfly may be that. Having said that, I also had the opportunity to go shoot a 90 kilogram, which is apparently about 200 pounds, if you do the math right. You come out to it just maybe 200 pounds, just a little bit over, a 90 kilogram deer at 130 yards with the butterfly sights, using the folding stock, which I also have been calling a brace, and we can talk about that if you want. But standing in a field, shooting and hitting a deer at 130 yards, relatively high hit towards the back of the animal that dropped it. It went about 15 feet, dropped, started to get up again, put its head back down, and just stayed there. So, the bullet works. I was able to put round into the deer and drop the deer. The process of having spent 2 days, one on the indoor range, getting used to that butterfly sight, definitely got me acclimated to it. So, that's a good picture. The picture you're putting up, let me talk about that, because I think I said earlier something about how people are comparing this to a Magnum revolver round.
Sure. And my next question, and we need to start wrapping up a little bit, is how does this compare to something that we're all familiar with? And I think this is a great place to go with it. We see in the background the Ballistics Gel Test. And for those that are not familiar with this, the two kind of pillars there are actually bone simulant. That's meant to represent like a rib cage or something like that. It's synthetic bone basically, and I believe what we're looking at is the top would be that revolver and the bottom would be the 7.5, and that actually punched through, and that's pretty decent wounding even in the beginning there. But do you want to kind of expand on what this is like to shoot? Because obviously this, if it's priced in the thousands plural range, that's going to be cost prohibitive for a lot of people, and they may not be able to get their hands on one, at least for quite a while. So I think it'll be interesting to kind of hear what you have to say in that regard.
First of all, real quick, because people, to put that in context, that picture you just showed, that 7.5 round was fired from 100 meters, and those bone simulants there, that was a half inch and a half inch of bone. That was simulating
back up.
A large animal, a moose, cow. I mean, that's simulating large animal bones. So that's a test that's devised primarily to test hunting rounds, but we wanted to use that to show what's going on here. That's an inch of bone. It's basically a half inch and a half inch with a gap to represent like pushing through a moose femur, right?
Ooh, that's dense.
The 7.5 was shot, and there was also 2 millimeters of rubber skin simulant, hide simulant on the front of it. So that 7.5 round was shot from 100 meters away, out of a test barrel, because that's a normal sized block of gelatin. Nobody was doing that offhand, trying to get lucky. So out of a test barrel, that one round was fired out of a 6-inch test barrel, 100 meters away. The .357 round was fired from a rest. I shot it myself. It's a .357 Magnum round. It was a MagTech, a relatively hot 124 grain hollow point bullet from 10 meters. So 1/10 the distance, and it didn't even make it through that second piece of bone, as you can see.
Sure, you can kind of see it just resting in the center there. And, I'll speak to this because through my another part of my business, I get to see a lot of ballistics gel testing firsthand. I've seen some incredible things, and bone is one of the most difficult barriers that a bullet will ever have to deal with. It's like a hard, spongy type material because it's porous, it's dense, it's wet, it's constantly a different material every time, different regions of the bone, etc. So to be able to punch through 2 1-inch thick pieces, including a little bit of skin simulant. After going through the gel, I mean, whew, that's an impressive, and I mean, that is approximately 12 inches of penetration, because standard gel blocks are 6 by 6 by 16. So getting out there to about the 12-inch mark after going through, the quote unquote femur of a big animal is really impressive.
Well, you can see there, that's 50 centimeters on that one. So that's a 50 centimeter, which, divide by 2.54 or whatever that gets you.
Yeah, I don't math so good.
It went about 30 centimeters, which is going to be about, as you said, 12 inches. So people can see that's not just a guess. Like if you see that measurement down there, you'll see how that performed. So the gun is a pleasure to shoot. The gun made me want to shoot better, made me care about marksmanship and care about trigger press in a way that I just generally don't worry about with pistol rounds, because I'm shooting it, 10 feet, 15 feet, 30 feet for my own personal defense practice. What I teach people to do is relatively close quarters. So we correct major problems, major deficiencies with trigger press. But the idea of developing high level marksmanship skill isn't something that we generally focus on, or that I generally spend a lot of time on. I usually just make fun of like Rob Latham or something on video with that.
Sure.
We go back and forth on that. But the interesting thing is, and people can see the video, we're going to be releasing a lot of the video coming up in March in conjunction with the European SHOT Show. I posted some pictures to social media. What they're going to see is that in almost every case, I'm not shooting this in a push-pull weaver. I'm not even pushing it or shooting it in a Chapman type position, which is something we teach in our advanced pistol handling course specifically for if you had to press your gun into service at 50 yards in that active shooter scenario, getting some more isolation on the movement of the gun. I purposefully shot this gun, much to the dismay of some of the people that were there trying to maybe coach a little bit in a foreign language, in the normal, tactical turtle, weight forward, shoulders up, head inside the arms, the same position that I teach people to shoot combatively for a dynamic environment all the time. That's generally how I was shooting this gun. I did a couple of times, just kind of play around with what would happen, bending that elbow and blading out a little bit, but that's not how I shoot, and I wanted to bring some legitimacy to be able to compare what
Sure.
this does to what
you
what
have
I
to
do.
have that basis for comparison to everything else, because this is very unique, and we as human beings have to have that comparison.
So I didn't want to reinvent the wheel.
So one of the biggest questions here, and we'll make this the last question that we need to cover here, because we're coming up on like 45-ish minutes of chatting. There's a lot of people asking, what's the recoil like? We have comparison to like a 357 Magnum as far as terminal performance, but how does it actually recoil? I mean, it's a big gun. It's not small at all. What's it feel like?
It weighs about as much as a 6-inch 44 Magnum revolver. It weighs about as much as a full-size, tricked-out 1911 6-inch barrel. I mean, within 100 grams. And people will see this. I took screenshots of the gun on the scale. A Desert Eagle, noticeably heavier. And What's really interesting is the balance of the gun. The other thing about this gun is that unlike something like a Para-Ordnance 15+1 45, which is one of the guns we shot in comparison, those are 230 grain bullets. So every time you fire a bullet, you lose 230 plus grains of weight at the back end, right? Which starts to make the front end be a lot heavier. This gun, they're 100 grain bullets. So yeah, you're going down, but dramatically less than when you shoot the rounds out of a 45, dramatically less than when you shoot the rounds out of the 44. So you end up with a gun that's much more consistent feeling front to back of the magazine, which a lot of big heavy bullet Magnum type guns aren't. The other thing about this gun is the balance doesn't put a lot of weight out in front of the hand. The gun sits in the hand really well. Again, that CZ-esque grip, right? The gun sits really well in the hand. There are two different grip sizes, a slim one and a larger, flatter one on the back strap. The slim one felt much better to me, but I actually ended up shooting much better with the wider one, especially one-handed. One of the things that was part of the design parameters was a gun that shot well and performed well one-handed for most shooters. And the contour of the grip area, the girth at the top of the grip, the beaver tail, the contours around the trigger area are really important to the way the hand fits the gun. And that wider back strap on the wide grips fills the hand better, especially one-handed, and gives you a much better recoil impulse. The last thing about the shooting, of course, is that recoil impulse coming out of that low guide rod coming into the hand. One of the things that a lot of people have said for a long time, when you sort of roll your eyes at the VP9 or the 320 when I really feel that SIG and HK both could have lowered their bore axes significantly when they got rid of their hammers. They could have lowered those bore axes. And what you hear is, and I've heard this about the Caracol from great gun designers for years, well, it's not just the bore axis. There are other factors about where the recoil impulse hits that affect felt recoil and muzzle flip. All true. And the Hudson is one, again, we've been talking about for the last month that addresses that by lowering the recoil impulse dramatically. Well, so does the FK BRNO. The FK BRNO lowers the recoil impulse dramatically, even though it's still a hammer-fired gun and has a very high bore axis. But between the weight, the lowering of the recoil guide, and the contours of the grip, the gun's a pleasure to shoot. Far more pleasant to shoot than the plus Ps out of the Para 45. Certainly more pleasurable to shoot than the Desert Eagle. And I've owned the 44 and I still own the .50. I've owned Desert Eagles because they're cool and they're fun, but they're not fun to shoot. They're a novelty, 44 Magnum. Right. I've got an 8 3/8 inch barrel 44 Magnum I've used as a hunting gun, but it's not that fun to shoot. It's a novelty. You pull it out. Certainly any of the smaller Magnums, they're just not that much fun to shoot. This gun was fun to shoot.
I in my head, I'm kind of seeing it along the lines of, what it's like to shoot the FN57. It's a very unique recoil impulse on that gun because it's a lightweight gun, but that cartridge is a lightweight cartridge. So you got a super fast tracking slide and, a fast recoil impulse, but it's not like hammering you. You know what I mean? Like right. It's moving. Right. But it's kind of a different feel than what we're all used to. But you know what, Rob, I think that's where we're going to have to stop tonight. I don't want to, take up all of your time. I know you're a super busy guy. You've got more stuff going on. Why don't you tell people where they can find you and find more information about this gun, because you've got a lot more coming.
Yeah, obviously FK BRNO has their own website, and that's kind of the corporate stuff. If you want to see more of my thoughts on it and sort of my reports, I'm going to be publishing them through personaldefensenetwork.com on the blog. I'll be distributing through all my social media. We'll probably talk a little bit about the gun tonight on Training Talk with Grant Cunningham through the Personal Defense Network website and social media. You can find that. We're going to do that show, I think, coming up in about an hour and a half, something like that. But the second report, and then the third report and the fourth report will be put out through the Personal Defense Network blog, and that's where the article you've been showing pictures from is posted now. I think it's should be the most recent article, maybe close to the top on the blog at PDN.
That's fantastic, man. That's all good info. I think I'm going to try and get my hands on one and go hunting with it, because that's what appealed to me the most, because obviously it's not something I'm going to throw on my hip and carry every day like we talked about. It's almost like a short-range rifle. It's a very, very, very unique gun. I think you've given us a lot of great info, and I just want to say thank you for your time tonight. And, the TGC audience surely appreciates the information, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man. I appreciate what you're doing. Like I said, it's SHOT Show. I've been watching and glad to be on the show for the second time now. We'll make it 3 maybe when the tour starts in March.
Hell yeah, brother. Thank you so much, man. We'll see you guys soon. And for those of you watching, thank you all for watching. And TGC News Monday, be there.